Oh, Alex, you're teasing me, getting all the way up to level or to section E, and then not finishing it. Oh, okay. Well, I'll forgive you because the rest of the score is so excellent and so much fun. There is a big dose of the cinematic here. Big sweeping textures and this kind of sense of kind of shoving the the beat forwards. That's a very that is a very cinematic, very Hollywood kind of a touch. So yeah, so if you are getting into epic film scoring, then I think that you have a lot of chops. So let's just go straight into the evaluation criteria. Now, I think that we can pretty much set aside the problem of the pitch weight being in the upper middle register of the piano. You spread your the scope of your scoring across the orchestra really nicely, and then the next concern of the thematic material repeating often, possibly sounding repetitive if orchestrated the same way throughout. Right at the very beginning, you answer, you address that concern immediately, right? You orchestrate these two pairs of bars in different ways, and then even though you sort of come back to the same exact treatment of those two bars, I think that it validates it, right? It would be the same as if you had four bars orchestrated like this in a row, and then four bars orchestrated like this in a row here, right? So it has the same effect of breaking up the potential monotony, right? One thing that your score sort of lacks is like telling me how many people are playing on what instrument at any given time, and I'm sure that that's something that you could get in the finalization stage with no problem. But you have to understand that for me, it's sort of, reading this is like reading a sentence without punctuation, right? Or without the proper case, like plurals, like plural and singular. I don't really know, like they were walking down the hill, right? Is that they singular or they plural, right? That's kind of what I see when I see this, right? Or especially like the horn parts, right? Here you have kind of divided things up, but that doesn't really tell me that this is going back to a single player or what, right? And it's a little strange, right? Shouldn't the bottom voice be like this, right? Shouldn't it be just if there's nothing going on, shouldn't it be a bar rest? Anyway, so it's just little things like that. You really need to tell me how many people are playing at any given time. And I think that your piece could easily have used a bass trombone. I think that would have really helped it be even more big and cinematic and bold. So if we just look at the very lovely, straightforward way that this is scored, with your, it's just a very, it's a nice stretched out condensation. We've got the horns and trumpets and octaves doing that, da-da-dun, 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 da-da-dun. And I'm just gonna zoom in here. Yeah, see, so there are chakaturas, so they're just like really crushed on there at the beginning of each beat. And that works really great with the castanets and so on. And then spiccato. So in other words, I think saltando is a kind of maybe a better way of putting it. Just SALT period. I think is the spiccato and saltando more or less mean the same thing. But I think just like in terms of which term is the most commonly used and what does it mean and everything else. I think saltando is probably better in this case because you just really want that leaping bow. And then here you could just say norm. You don't have to say normal, just say norm. And then here you would have to say norm again, right? So norm, salt, norm. All right, and then yeah, and then you got this bum bum. It's really lovely. Yeah, and then just a touch of contrary motion there. That's so neat. And then you go to this, you know, you just basically pull out the horns there. I'm just going to change this to a transposing score, if you don't mind. All right, so that makes a whole lot more sense to me visually. So yeah, so you're just bulking up your strings or your violins here, and doubling from above with piccolo. You know, you're adding that an octave doubling to the G sharp above the trombones and so on. We're adding weight to the trumpet part in here and so on. It's very, very simple, straightforward orchestration, but it's really effective, right? So, so that's the A section. Now the B section, we have the concerns of melodic development soaring quite high, accompaniment figures covering a wide range, and so on. So how do you deal with that? So here I would say, you know, it's time to introduce some alternate clefs. And to do that, I would say, like, before you introduce the alternate clefs, just put in the correction clef first, right? That's always my preference. Yeah, in dealing with this. I guess this could move back to here. All right. And then put in some clefs that make it way easier to read. All right. So in this case, like, even though, like, that's, you know, that should be fine for the viola player to read, I just feel, darn it, I just feel that that this just makes it a little clearer, right? Because, you know, everything is, since it's a pattern, it's sort of across a certain series of notes. Now, as a violist, I could read either with no problem, but, you know, it's just being what it is. I feel it's way easier to read, just adding, you know, tenor clef here and treble clef there. Now, one thing I would say about the treatment of the melody here, you know, you are allowing the piccolo and the flute and everything to just sort of join in and add this curve so that it appears to go up. So that is solving the problem. I'm wondering if you could go all the way up to here to A first, right? So don't worry about the red color there. That's sort of for, you know, it's saying watch out if you're, you know, student orchestra, semi-pro orchestra, they might have problems, right? So I think that this kind of works a little bit better. And then as to right in here, why can't this double the flutes from below, right? So you don't have to worry about, so if you do it this way, then you don't have to worry about the sudden drop. The way that you've originally scored it, you have this drop of a seventh across 30 instruments, right? 16 first players, 14 second players. You're going to hear them drop. You're going to hear the drop more than you're going to hear the natural arc, right? But, you know, by putting the A up here and by having the second violinist come in with the I'm guessing this is A2 flutes. By having that doubling, then you really won't notice the drop so much, right? And the overtones of the first and second violins will do the trick to make it appear as if that at least one group is continuing to play at pitch with the piccolos, right? Okay. And then, you know, just looking at the same concern over here, this is exactly right. Have the piccolo start lower to begin with. It's not, you know, it is low, but it's not so low that it's a problem. And this, you know, very, very cool. You know, I think that that's exactly the right way to do it. Now, as to everything else, though, I would say, could you do this instead of how you have worked it out? Like, could you bolster the piccolo line and then drop down right here? I think that would be more seamless, and that this top line would be much brighter and stronger. Because right here, see, the problem is this, that these are fairly weak notes for the piccolo right in here, right? So this top line just doesn't really have any brilliance, and it'll start to shine and it'll start to come out, and it'll almost feel as if it's coming from nowhere. And you can sort of hear that on the mock-up too, right? You can kind of sort of, you can't really hear the piccolo line at first, and then it starts to emerge and kind of come out of the texture and so on. So if that's what you want, then that's what you get. But I would say if you really want this line here on the piccolo to be stronger, just keep the doubling up all the way to the A and then drop here. And then I think everything else works really, really great. Now, of course, this is just so much fun. You know, that's very, very fun. And you have a lot of timpani in here. Just a lot of timpani. And I'm wondering if, like, in some places, pizzicato lower strings could do the trick just as well, right? On some of these. Because really, it's, you know, when you have soft timpani underneath a texture like this, it's essentially taking the role of a pizzicato bass, right? So it's kind of acting as or in this case, reinforcement, right? You're reinforcing your basses right in here, right? In a kind of a punctuated fashion. So this, what you may not be aware of here, or might not be thinking of, Alex, is that your basses and cellos are actually 2 octaves apart here. And is that really what you intend? Right? See, here you have a quadruple octave. So you have the double basses on the bottom, and then you have an octave space. See, this E here is actually the E below the staff of the cellos, right? So there's a big gap in there, and then there's the cellos on top of that and the violas on top of that, right? See, if you drop everything an octave, right, this is a triple octave. You know, with each instrument playing an octave higher than the previous one. I mean, there's a kind of cool sound to that, but I just want to make absolutely sure that, you know, that you were aware of that. This is really neat, like the little deviations that you make from the exact pattern are just very, very nice. And you know, as far as the accompaniment right in here, I think that you could double it a little bit more, maybe adding some strength from, say, the bassoons or some other instrument, just to give it a little bit more oomph right in here. But I really love this too, you know, fortissimo, piano, and then crescendo to fortissimo, and then mezzo piano, right? Piano and mezzo piano. There's I think that you could get by with this just being piano, right? Piano and then soli, right? Or if you needed to. But anyways, it's all fine. It's you can just leave it alone. You don't have to change anything. Yeah, but look, if this is going to be mezzo forte coming in, then it has to be mezzo forte with the rest of the wind. So you might as well just mark the mezzo forte here, right? Anyhow, okay. So that takes us to this next section here. Our next concern being, is there a textural contrast in this section? And there sure is. It's just so nice. Now here you have more or less elected to put the that sort of internal harmony above the actual, you know, the pitches of the melody, right? The melody here is E, 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 right? And so you know, from above you have the C, right? C, bum, bum. You know, you have that really, really high. So it works here in a way that it doesn't in other scores, simply because you have the the strongest instruments in the orchestra besides the percussion playing octaves on this E, right? So if you didn't have that, it wouldn't work, but it barely works. Anyhow, but it's fine. You have your chorale in here. I don't think you need to go diminuendo here. I think you just go bum bum bum, and then forte here, bum 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 bum, and also since this is portato, right? Just really try to keep the articulation on your portato uniform. All right. Right. So this is going to be duh. Right? So it's just way clearer that way. Yeah, so just, what you have to understand is when you put a slur over tenuto marks, you have the perfect kind of portato scoring. And that here you're saying like add extra oomph on this last one. It's better for it just to be a separately tongued note, all right? Especially in the context that it is starting a new rhythmic phrase, right? The rhythmic phrase goes 2-3-1, 2-3-1, 2-3-1, right? So it's just better to go tongue, right? Not Okay, and so dun 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 dun. Yeah, that all works with a little bit of touch of xylophone in there. And yeah, this is so fun. You're just throwing in trumpet, and I'm assuming this is A3 trumpets, right? With some accompaniment from your lower winds. And then very, very low reaction from trombones and your lower winds continuing on. That's just very fun, once again, very simple scoring, and I think that works really great. So the only comment I would say about this final section, you are maintaining a driving staccato here, right? And I think the lead in, the transition to the next passage, I feel it is smooth. I think that works too. My question here, though, is, do you really want it so paced, right? Do you really want bum, 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 bum? There's a certain benefit that I see in the way that it's originally scored in the piano part, in that it sort of reminds me of a sort of rebellious little toddler running down the street and its mother just desperately trying to catch up. You know what I mean? And that's because there is no pacing in the piano part. It just goes where is this heading? Right? After 4 bars, you're thinking, wow, are they ever going to catch that little kid? But here you're sort of pacing it, so mom is obviously running alongside the child. So do we really want that? Do we want the sense that the child is being, that this naughty child of a phrase is being paced all the way through by elements under it, right? And that's just something you have to decide for yourself. But it's just something I'm putting out there in case you kind of are considering it. And it would be a good opportunity for you to cut down a little bit on so much timpani. The problem, like there isn't anything wrong, right? There is no aesthetic problem with any individual group of bars as you have scored them in terms of your timpani. The danger is that the audience will get so used to hearing timpani coming in there and doing things all the time that the timpani will lose its impact, right? And it is an impactful instrument. It's kind of like, like when you go to a party and you have a relative who's very loud and obnoxious, right? And, and then after a while you just start to tune them out. Right? Like if you can, right? So if you can tune them out, you will tune them out, right? And that is the problem with the timpani. It is even at soft dynamics, it's very, very powerful. So, can it be continuously used for rhythmic emphasis? Should it be, right? Will the audience just start to say, oh, well, yeah, I mean, you heard one timpani bass line, you heard them all, right? You don't want that reaction, okay? So watch out is all I'm saying. I'm not saying change this or don't change this. I'm just saying watch out. And that takes us to B. And as I was saying before, I felt that the lead in, the transition to B was very, very nicely done, very smoothly done. And this is cool. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so you know what I would say? Instead of accent, have a tenuto here. So da 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 da. Right. So you don't really need the punch at the beginning of the note. Just a tenuto on there, just to make the note blocky, and then flick off of the end there. Right. Yeah, there was this one little thing. I guess it's in the next section. I took a bunch of mental notes for this. Okay. So our concerns heading into section B are pretty simple: contrasts of color and breadth of texture in middle register scoring. Because in the piano score, everything was in between the first two octaves above middle C, right? So now we're just moving everything down about an octave and a half, or half an octave, until we get to this section right in here. So these 8 bars are fairly middle register. So do we have enough contrast of color to maintain interest? I would say that we do. Maintaining differentiated roles and closely spaced melodies and overlapping accompaniment figures, highlighting inner voices, you do all that stuff really nicely in here. As far as like this, the other concern of keeping high interjecting notes from sounding too glaringly repetitive, you've chosen to interpret them all as sort of flutter tongue plus xylophone. And that's okay. That's fine. I mean, I think you sort of end up making them a thing of their own, and I won't knock it. I think that like it would be better just to mark this one mezzo piano and this one mezzo forte, rather than having a hairpin across rests. Try not to hairpin across rests. I mean, it's technically it's allowable, but I just feel it's bad form, because like the player is just going to play this, and then it's sort of like, well, how much louder did I get here? And they might ask the clarinet player, hey, what do you have at bar 29? He says, well, I've got a mezzo piano. I was like, well, that's really got me stumped, right? So, and there's also a little bit of a slight concern with balance here, but I understand what you're doing. You're just sort of going, rrr, rrr. It's sort of like thump, thump, and it doesn't really get in the way with other instruments that are sort of playing mezzo piano and so on around it. But just, watch out for mezzo dynamics in general, everybody. I'm not saying that you have any real problems in here in your score, Alex, but just, avoid mezzo dynamics as a default. It is not necessarily a safe place to just sit, right? And having like endless little tiny variations between mezzo piano and mezzo forte and so on and so forth, I think it just eventually just becomes rather annoying to the player. But this is all cool, this bum 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 bum. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, just so cool. Just a lot of the decisions in here, just so nicely done. I like the doubling of the violas here with the violins. I think that keeps it really focused. And this is very cool too here. And just coming right in there with the violas an octave higher than the cellos. Nice idea. Yeah, and same thing there. Yeah. And we end up here. I like this. Like you're sort of pushing from niente to F sharp sounding B. Okay, so you know what? I'm just going to encourage you, like to use triple P, because it means the same thing. Like avoid using the niente crescendo mark unless there is something that is absolutely uniquely audible about the transition from niente to whatever dynamic you are the target dynamic, right? And the same thing is true going the opposite direction. Going like a niente diminuendo hairpin. Don't use that unless the traveling to the niente dynamic is something that the audience will pay attention to, right? So if the audience is like, if this is coming from out of nowhere, you might as well just mark triple P in there, and they will just appear to have come out of nowhere. As opposed to this, which what the effect will be. It will be exactly the same as if they started pianissimo, triple P, and went to piano crescendo. So if that's going to be the exact same effect, then just mark it the normal way, right? Only use niente hairpins, the marking niente, and so on, when it is an effect that the audience is supposed to take note of, right? It is an actual effect that is there for its own sake, right? Here, this is just basically, oh, you want the horn to come out of nowhere, so that's fine. Just triple P is fine. So that's as soft as you can play musically to piano crescendo. Okay, and then this is all nicely done. Our next concerns here are keeping the triplets from overwhelming the melodic line. I think that you do that really nicely, and in fact, I think that this is one of the stronger examples of this. But I don't think that you should remove the articulations. They're there for a reason. They make sense. Like so, accent, tenuto, right? Accent. And, couldn't this be slurred? Da, da, da. Or, you could have it da, 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 if you want to. Yeah, okay, so one solo, who's this? Is this fourth and third? Is this third? Who is this? And then trumpet. How many trumpets? Like you're coming in on top. How many trumpets are playing along and going up to that G? Probably, I would hope just one, right? All right. Now, as far as, and then here you're saying one solo. Oh, I see. Tutti. Aha. Bum, bum, bum. Don't use tutti on a wind or brass part. Okay? So this was in the 12 common scoring errors. Alex, you should have watched that. All right. So don't use, that is something that's in like Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique published score. We don't use that anymore. If this is intended to be two players, you have to say A2, right? And then you would say the same thing here, A2. So don't use tutti, use A2. Okay? Tutti is something that is reserved for many players on a line in either the strings or like in a band situation with, say, like flutes or clarinets, where you've got like maybe 4 to 8 players, or like maybe brass band where you've got a bunch of maybe you've got a quartet of cornets or something like that, or saxophones or something on one staff. Then you would say tutti, right? But don't use it in a horn context. All right. Okay, yeah, but just go ahead and watch that 12 common scoring errors. Okay, maybe you did watch it and you missed this, but yeah, don't use tutti on a. Right, so A2, right? Okay, now here I felt that this was also just beautifully scored. This, da 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 da. I just felt that was so cool. Are you sure that you want to slur everything? Because Falla sort of gives you it gives you little accented groups, right? Da 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 da. He's sort of kind of telling you that he really wants the first note of each beam group to be accented. And I don't think that you would lose any of this kind of growing, this beautiful sense of blooming upwards that you get if you were to score each one separately with its own accent at the beginning. But it's fine. I mean, if that's how you feel that this is going to work best, it's good. It's just we're kind of lacking the pacing. Right here is where pacing is good, right? Rather than, yeah. Okay, and then as to the use of the timpani in here, I mean it's all fine. The problem though is there's like no emphasis. There's no accents. There's no nothing at the end, right? What does Falla want? He wants bum 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 boom, bum 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 boom, bum 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 boom, right? And here we've got timpani not doing anything to bring that out, and there's no punch at that, on the very last thing. So that's kind of what makes this really dancey, right? Bum 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 boom, bum 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 boom, right? He is anticipating the downbeat of the next bar and then not putting a very strong downbeat. Like the only thing that's strong about the downbeat is the accent on the triplet, which you're missing in some bars. Right? So anyway, so just watch out. There's a certain logic to the way everything was set up in the piano score. So, maybe this is a place where you could hold back a little bit on the timpani too, or just add it to emphasize those moments. All right. All right, now here you wanted kind of a smoother bowing leading into C, and you are asking for down bow, up bow, and so on. So this is something I would completely leave to the players, right? They may come up with a strategy that is way better than anything that you or I could come up with, right? And I'm saying that as somebody who actually played in a string section and had to make decisions about bowing directions and everything else, right? Like, I've been concertmaster, I've been first principal second player, principal violist. In admittedly, it was a student orchestra, but like kind of making those decisions really should be something that is left to the players. And I know what you're trying to do here. Okay, but the problem with this is that by the time you get to the strongest place in your phrasing, you're using a down bow. And then here you're saying up bow, right where there should be a down bow. So, my impulse here, I'm not a cellist, but my impulse would be that this would be where the down bow, this is where the up bow would need to go to get the most amount of power leading into the crescendo. And then for a very, very long note like this, I would want, and especially one that died away, I would want a down bow, right? So you're sort of working against the player by prescribing the opposite thing. This is the kind of thing that will get crossed out. And if you were in the rehearsal and you noticed that they did it the wrong way, and then you were to step in and say, "Hey, excuse me, I wanted the down bow there. Why did you do it the other way?" Then that's a raised hand at rehearsal and a waste of money and so on, right? So leave it to your section principals and your concertmaster to decide how the bowing is going to go. But I would say, aside from that, the big concern here is that I feel that there's just not quite enough going on here at C. One of my evaluation criteria is convincing allargando expansion and a smooth release into bar 49, right? So if you listen to what the pianist is doing, and you notice like that I put in the pedal mark in the template score, they are hitting the low note, and then as the music rises across the piano keys, the pitches sustain until the end of the bar, right? Until the next chord. So I feel that that's something that needs to be simulated in the piano part, or in the orchestration of the piano part. So here, this like the timpani would appear to sort of cover some of that, right? So sort of kind of absorbing some of the sound going forward, and that's partially effective, but it still is not enough. I think that as the pitches are introduced, they need to hold in another instrument, say like maybe here like the lowest note of the clarinet could maybe hold this down, or maybe a bassoon note could hold this down, and then you're adding the G sharp, and another instrument plays the same note at the same time, and so as you go forward, the notes are sustained, right? So, and then there's more of an absolute definite push and then release, right? Anyway, so but where you are leading is very, very cool. I love the idea of using the English horn. It's a beautiful register, the kind of upper register. You don't take it too high. I mean, it's going all the way up to E, which is getting kind of thin and uncharacteristic of the English horn. But when you think about it, I mean, Rob Roy goes up there too. The famous Berlioz English horn solo for Rob Roy, and it's interesting that the first instance of of English horn in the orchestra by at least in a symphonic way by Berlioz doesn't really use the kind of lower, more generous area of the English horn all that much. He's really focused on the upper limits, and the contrast between that and the middle register of the oboe. So this is all fine. I think that you're missing some things here, though, right? One of it is just some slurring, right? Do you really want this player to go da 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 da, right? And then here we have sort of like two slurs working on top of each other, which is like a pianistic thing. It's not something that you could really do in an it just kind of doesn't really mean anything orchestrally, right? And then here, da 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 ta ta right? Do you really want none of this to be slurred? So you have to introduce some of that. And then another thing to think about is, do you want this to be portato? We discussed portato earlier, but if you put a slur on top of these tenuto marks, then it becomes a pulse. Da 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 da. You do the same thing here. Da 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 ba 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 bum, and so on, right? Another thing is we just are totally missing. Like here, you're saying, hey, well sung, very expressive of the melody, right? So, okay, that's fine, but the player doesn't need to read this. The player needs to read this. Right? Right? Oops. You have to give them some cues as to what to do. Maybe you want to start the crescendo here. Right? Dum, dum, right? Just like da 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 ba 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 bum. So just really tell the player everything. Just don't leave it up to them how to be expressive. The same thing here. When you get to here, just be generous with the hairpins. I mean, don't go insane with them, but you tell the player, show the player what you want them to do. And I would say in this case, like if I have provided a dashed diminuendo, then you can just completely realize that as a real, like just a standard diminuendo, standard hairpin. Don't give them the dash thing. That's sort of like, it's kind of like an editorial comment. They don't need any editorial comments. You have decided that you want this to be diminuendo, so by golly, just tell them that it's diminuendo, right? Anyway, I shouldn't be adding all these things and just leaving them in there for you. Okay, so yeah, so just add a lot of nuances. Make sure that there are, that there's, things are slurred. Think about using portato, things like that, right? Just really make this live. And then you don't need to tell them, bien chantant. Just have them, it's all written out for them, right? It's well sung. It's all of the nuances, all the expression is there. Okay, so as far as the the accompaniment is concerned, I think it's very, very cool. I love this sort of kind of backgroundy stuff. And as far as this bass in here is concerned, it sort of wanders a little bit, but it's still all right. I try not to do this. Just give us, just give that poor player a standard quarter note, right? Yeah, same thing here, right? That should be a quarter note. Then when you get to here, I think that you could definitely throw in more going on. What is going on in the bass on the first beat? It is setting up this energy, ya da da da, right? Ya da 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 da. So just really, this has to be a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a, then 1E and a 2E and a reaching up. All right, so don't mess around here with this first beat. It has to be aggressive, right? Because all of this is bottled up. It's like bottled up energy. And that's one of the reasons why there are 16th notes in the accompaniment part, which you've left out, but that's all right. So, there's this, there's tension in there, and there is suppressed activity, and then here it just comes out, right? Let it come out from the very first beat, right? Even though this is finishing, ya-da-da-dum, if you have activity going on underneath the reply, da-da-da-dum, then you better have it under the first statement, I would say. But then, right in here, I think that I think you have this urge to sort of make things different, right? And to add some interesting colors and some interesting contrapuntal motion and so on. And here, I feel that your ambitions are betraying you. The note underneath this needs to be a very well marked B flat. I don't think you can go to C here. And then here, leading into it, you're getting to the B flat too early, right? If you look at the piano part, and I'm actually taking a quick look at it myself. Yeah, so it's it's like a E flat fifth over D, right? And then it goes C F, right here. Sorry, my mouse is wandering there. So it goes C F here, and then B flat on the downbeat. So it just sounds wrong, right? You are giving away too much here by not going to B flat, right? And then on the following bar, you go to F, which is the 5 of the B flat, so that's fine, right? But this just doesn't quite work the way that it's scored in the bass, I would say. But I still really love this, like the oboe and the flute working together, and just a little rolled cymbal and so on, and timpani and so on. You got to give us some dynamic markings here. Crescendo from what, right? Is this really subtle, like piano crescendo to mezzo piano, or is it like pianissimo crescendo to mezzo forte? I mean, what are the parameters? You have to tell the player. Yeah, so flautando, normal. Okay, so getting to this point, right? You're pretty much following my my tempo recommendations, and I think it works really, really well for your orchestration, if I do say so myself. Yeah, da 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 dum, ba ba bum dum, and then Pokemon da 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 dum. Yeah, and then this is so great. Ba 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 dum, and yeah, then this just fat honky brass right in here. Bum 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 bum. How many of what and who? Here's where a bass trombone would be really, really amazing, right? Just like not necessarily playing all the way up to this high B flat or anything, but just like maybe trading off here from the B flat, right? And then, yeah, if you have a really good bass trombonist, they could play this whole thing. But that low C sharp, that is just a kind of a big fat hairy note for trombone. So yeah, It's still possible. It's still all right. But I just think that using, trading off to bass trombone on some of the low notes is you could have bass trombone going bum bum, and then have just your standard trombone take over on all this high stuff, and then coming back in on bass trombone here, and so on, and then bass trombone just trading off. I just think, you just get big, fatter, nastier, messier notes, right? I think that works really great. And then, are you sure you want this to be slurred? Like you're saying marcato. What does that mean? Marcato, but you're slurring. I don't get it. Marcato would be, adding all of those accents, right? So that, what does Falla do? He tells you he wants this to be tenuto, and then he wants this whole bar to be accents, right? So dun 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 dun, right? So the slur doesn't really happen until here. So maybe rethink this, right? So you can't have both. You either have to have the marcato with the accents, or you have to have the slurs without the marcato, right? So forte a marcato. I mean, it just doesn't make, and it's also. It would work under one bow, but it still is just kind of, it sort of seems to be playing against the idea of a nice slurred bowing right in there. Yeah, and this, this kind of leaping up to, so, a lot of this stuff is kind of, concerto quality. Just really going all the way up there. This is going to take some practice to do, right? It just would be so much simpler if you were to trade off to viola here. Does the violist need to hold all the way in to the end of the bar? Could they let go about right here and then come in and play this next part? Why does it have to be the cellos, right? Why do they have to have, and for that matter, why does it have to be one trombone player just going all the heck the way across here? So maybe rethink some of these big grand gestures and trade off between instruments a little bit more. Okay, so here we're getting into kind of timpani pacing, and this col legno pacing, and so on and so forth. So I'm just not sure here. Okay, so pianissimo, crescendo, pianissimo, crescendo, pianissimo. I don't get this. Pianissimo. Okay, forte. What is the? Hang on. I'm gonna just. What is this attached to? Is it a? Yeah. Okay. All right. So I just don't understand the dynamics here. So I guess I'm guessing this means that these are supposed to be below, right? Is that right? Is that what's supposed to be going on here? You're messing me up here. So yeah, don't put the dynamics above the. Don't put them above the. Yeah. All right. So this is all fine, Yeah, just so long as you're aware that the tenuto bowing in strings is like zoom, right? Just imagine a string going, the bowing going zoom, 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 zoom. It's to use a long bow, right? It's just to use up as much bow as possible. Now, this at agitato, the players really cannot go all that far because they have to come back, right? So despite the fact that you've marked it pianissimo, it's going to be louder than pianissimo. The more tenuto they add there, the less pianissimo it's going to be, right? Because it's the speed of the bow going across the string. So I think you might need to rethink that. Maybe not throw in the big zooming bow until you get to the end of the section, maybe, right? And then as far as the col legno is concerned, col legno battuto is already going to be spiccato. I don't think you need to say spiccato, right, or saltando. I think battuto, because it's a beating stroke, right? That the player is beating the and so the it is written into the whole technique that it bounces, right? Yeah. So so I think that like with timpani kind of pounding away, forte, diminuendo, mezzo forte, diminuendo, and so on. I think that in practice, right, in theory and in the mock-up, this is sounding good because col legno is always exaggerated, right? The actual the actual power of col legno is turned up a bit by the developers because they know that if they don't, then they are going to get heat from the users who are expecting whenever they drop in col legno, it's got to sound like Mars, right? But that just kind of upsets the whole apple cart when you are working with a real orchestra, because in a real orchestra, col legno is a very weak effect. It's much weaker than pizzicato, right? So with the way that this is scored, it sounds a bit like reminds me a bit of like you know the col legno effect that's used in like the early Star Trek films, right? This sort of has a kind of a tick-tock kind of an effect, and that's all good, right? You know, I'm not sorry if you hate that music, then I apologize, but you know, it has that kind of tick, 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 tick kind of a feeling. But the thing is, it's not very strong compared to the timpani and the you know, this kind of zooming bowing. So you might need to rethink everything, right? If you want, it's like what do you want here? Do you want the col legno? If you want the col legno and you want this to be more functional, then you've got to figure out some other articulation here. Maybe staccato rather than tenuto, right? Maybe you have to ease up on the volume of the timpani, and then you'll hear the col legno. Or maybe you want everything more or less the way that it is. You'll still have problems getting getting these to be really fast tenuto bows, but it is possible. In this case, it'll have to change to something else. You know, maybe pizzicato, maybe plucking with a pick or something. You know, although I wouldn't recommend that. People hate that. You know, they figure I can pluck with my finger just as good as you want. So don't tell me to do that, right? I've gotten that attitude from players before, or seen it. I haven't asked for it myself, but I've seen that. Then when you get to here, you know, like no big comments. I mean, I really like the idea of the way things are scored here, except what's this divisi 1 and 2? So like once again, you don't have an orchestra of trumpets, right? So you don't have like a section of 8 trumpet players. So this should be just, you know, you should just say 1 period 2 period. You don't have to use the word divisi at all, right? And same thing here. Like, you know, you don't have to even use anything because we know that this is the first and second horn players. So we know if we see 2 pitches here, that is going to just be 1 player. And then if we go to 1 voice, you have to tell us, is this 1 player? Is this 2 players, right? Is it A2? And then there's the other issue here, and that is that if you are scoring like this, then shouldn't the you know, shouldn't this be, you know, let's say that this is intended to be 2 horn players on top and 2 horn players on the bottom. Then the way that this has to be scored is like this, right? Here. Let's go to brass. 1 family. Here we go. Right? So that means that your first player and your second player are playing these intervals, and your third and fourth are playing the same intervals, right? So first and third, second and fourth, right? So that and you know, that would be, if you want A2 on all of these single lines, that's how you would do it, right? That's how you would divide this up. And I would say you definitely should do that if you are having, say, you know, the trumpets playing you know, all, you know, A3, like all 3 voices on one single bar, right? So, and the other thing too is that I'm really noticing this a very kind of understated use of multiple brass. Okay, so just, there, like, you could be having triads. You could be having 2 to 3 notes at once. If you have 3 players, if you have 3 trumpet players, you could be having chords being played. It's the same thing with the horns right in here. So you could be a much fuller brass chorale in here. Now, everything else about this page, I don't have a big problem with, really. There might be 1 or 2 little bits that other people will point out, but really, just watch out. Like, I don't think that, even at 132, I don't think that this is quite as possible as you think. Like, if you want da 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 da, if you really want a doubled, if you want this to be just a kind of a standard doubled notes in like a measured tremolo, then you can only have 1 beam, right? Because the beam itself, the existing beam, is is one of the values, right? And then the tremolo beam is the second value. Added them together, and that is a 16th note value, right, of tremolo. So is there really time for the, at the speed, is there really time for the player to be going on each note, right? I don't think there is. I think it's more like yada da 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 da, right? So it's da 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 da. It's like that kind of speed. So I think that this needs to be changed from double beam tremolo, measured tremolo, to single beams. Like double beam measured tremolo plus a beam is like unmeasured tremolo. All right. Okay, so those are my comments for this. I think it's all fine. All the other things. So, like, this is really a bass trombone line. You know what I mean? So I would just say add a staff, then have 2 trombones on 1 staff, and then bass trombone on its own staff and tuba on its own staff. Yeah, and considering how many trombones you've got lying around, you really do score a lot of low notes on your trumpets that could easily be played by the trombones with absolutely no problem at all. And this just builds up and so on. One thing that I do sort of miss is the trade-off between the higher and lower interpretations of the bass in the left hand, right? So it starts off. I would say on the previous page would be bum 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 bum, and then the answer in the piano score is bum 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 bum, and then da 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 dum bum 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 bum. Right? I just think that just adding that just adds so much impact, right? Just that trading, going back and forth. So it's 4 bars before, up then down, and then up then down, and down even a little lower, right? So I don't know. I mean. But otherwise, I don't really have any big problems with how this is done. And then I think that this works really great. Rallentando, agitato. You could give yourself a little bit of, like, make these all 8th notes, and then give yourself a little comma right here. And then starting this. Okay, now, here's the problem. You're going yada-dump. So why isn't the second player going da-da-dump, yada-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da? So you see what I'm saying? You're just doing half of the pattern. Instead of going yada-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You could easily overlap is the wrong word. You could easily have dovetailing phrases, right? So one player goes up to the A, and the other player goes A, and then goes back down and ends up on the A. And so you have, like, first player playing all of the notes going up, second player plays all of the 3 notes going down that connect all of the phrases. So that could be happening in both parts, in all 3 of these parts, and the xylophone player can actually play, like, they've got absolutely no problem playing all 4 notes of the rotating pattern. They can be going just the easiest thing in the world, right? So you don't need to just go yada-dun, 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 yada-dun. Throw in all 4 notes in the xylophone part. Trade off between the players, right? It's all fine. And then this stuff in here. Yeah, so look, okay, mezzo piano, I see what you're trying to do here. You're trying to keep the xylophone from being too loud, right? And then mezzo forte, this should also be mezzo forte too. Like like this is so loud and so powerful that it's really kind of drowning out what's going on. And then you've got this too, like forte in the trombone. So there's kind of almost no chance for the pattern to really have much prominence. But anyways, if you just to go back to what I was saying before, if you have a little comma here, a little pausa here, then the room can sort of die down from this big timpani strike and trombone and so on, the big cymbal crash that can die away slightly, and then the pattern can come in. So here is the big problem: is like this is like concerto level playing for your violas and cello players, and especially a double bass player. Wow, that would be technically an incredibly difficult thing to play. There's although these broken sixths. So I mean, sixths are not a big problem to finger, just kind of moving back and forth, but it's just so fast, and and trying to get all of the players to really nail this at that really top speed. I just think that's a big ask. Maybe you could be playing this like instead of notes that trade off, or notes that go back and forth. Maybe they could be like groups of notes that repeat. Da 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 da, rather than up down up down up down up down, right? Then here, like you're doing the opposite direction. What's wrong with going yada da 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 with the other player? Like you've got all these other players. So, all right. So my summation of this would be, Alex, that you've got such a great imagination and you've got just wonderful touches in these scores. But I think that using like multiple players, like when you have multiple. I think that using multiple players in certain situations is really going to help to grow your orchestration approach. Like I was saying before, just even kind of the perception that in a situation like this, if you want two players on a part, it's better to have both of them on each staff, right? So this would be played by the first, that would be played by the second. So these Ds would also be up here, and then the A and the D would also be here in this staff, like I pointed out before, right? So just that particular kind of thing, or chords in your three trumpets, right? We have three trumpet players. There's almost no examples of big harmonies from your trumpets or trombones with two or three players playing chordally, right? And then the same thing is like true for the winds. There's very little like interlacing kind of patterns, as I pointed out before, or the players kind of depending one on the other, or like them working together in harmonies and so on. And then there's also like the use of the word divisi when you should be saying, when you should just be saying like one period, right? Or just, not needing it at all, just because we can understand what an interval means, right? So I think that needs to be a little bit more developed on that. But I mean, aside from that, like, those are holes that are easy to fill, right? Those are little gaps that are easy to bridge. Your overall perception of like what works in big kinds of textures and other kinds of things. I think that's whether it's intuitive or it's the result of careful study. It's very, very it's powerful. It's very, very valid. And I think this is just a really excellent entry. It is remarkably good. So please don't take my critiques and my suggestions and my feedback the wrong way. I feel that you are just really on your way to some very powerful orchestration work. And it's just such a it's so great to have a score with this much energy and this much just forward thinking and nice proportions and just really kind of relating one section to the other. There was so much of that going on. Your sense of structure was really powerful. So just like getting a lot of those details right and not being afraid to have fuller textures, using more of your instruments, multiple instruments on each staff at the same time, things like that. I think it would just really, really grow. It just make you just such a powerful orchestrator, even more so than now. So thank you so much, Alex, for just such a great entry, and really deserves its place along all of the other really great entries here that we're seeing right at the very end of this challenge. Just so enjoyable to look at, and thank you so much for the work that you put into it, and for the support on Patreon. That really makes a lot of difference. And to all of my Patreon supporters, thanks so much. And to the whole community out there for sticking with me, and for those brave people who have stuck it out all the way to the end, to the very, very end of this video. Thank you very much. And for the comments, the likes, the shares, it just means a lot. I really do appreciate it. I don't think that the community has ever been so integrated and so together and so supportive of each other as they have been in this challenge. And it just makes me feel very happy and very proud of you guys. And you guys are doing a lot to make this all possible for people who will never know who you are, but will benefit by it. So that impresses me the most. Thanks, everybody. And now, for the next evaluation.